like to welcome our guests today from AlixPartners, Luca Signorelli and Sean Ashworth. Both Sean and Luca are focused on the retail end of the business at AlixPartners. And just to make it easiest, I'll let them introduce themselves quickly. Sean, do you want to take that first?
Sure, thanks, Todd. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Ashworth, and I lead the MP&A practice for the AlixPartners retail team. I've been in retail consulting for almost 20 years and spend majority of my time on MP&A related projects, really across specialty, department store, mass, wholesale, but the majority of the time is really specialty apparel is where I tend to focus. Luca?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Luca Signorelli. I currently work at AlixPartners, also in the retail practice, and primarily working with retailers to reinvent their operations, especially in the areas of new product development, sourcing, and merchandise planning and allocation. And before that, I'd spent 6 years at Target in Minneapolis.
Signorelli. Next time I say it, I promise I'm going to get it right, Luca.
Sounds
That's
good.
a promise. All right. So today's themes, there's a few things we're going to cover. You saw this in the invite when you signed up, so obviously something caught your eye here, but you get a little bit more descriptive in that AI and predictive are having the biggest impact on speed. So a big theme here you're going to see is us talking a little bit about how advanced analytics, predictive analytics can work in tandem with providing a level of speed when it comes to data-driven decisions, accelerating the processes that you have, perhaps re-examining some of the processes that you have thanks to AlixPartners being here, and understanding how profitable some of those changes and decisions can be. And of course, speed. Again, you're going to be sick of the word speed by the time we get through this webcast. But speed also has another component to it, which is really important, which is accuracy, meaning it doesn't matter how fast you're moving. It matters how well you're making these decisions, how accurate are these decisions, and how profitable are they for you in the business. So very quickly, for those that aren't familiar with Celect, I do this in every Celect webcast. So if you've seen this before, you'll get another dose. But if you haven't, hopefully it'll make you a little bit more familiar with us, so you can get some better context on what we're going to be doing here. So Celect helps retailers understand location-specific demand for a product and how the demand for that product is impacted by the assortment around it. And it's kind of an interesting thing to wrap your head around, but really understanding that allows retailers to make these smarter decisions, these better decisions that I was referring to before about the products that they're offering their customers, including things like how much inventory they buy, where they put these products to sell, and where those products are shipped from. And these I'll touch on a little bit later in the session about the specific ways that we do this. And the result of that is optimize inventories through merchandise planning and supply chain processes. And inventory optimization is our theme, is really is what we hang our hat on here at Celect. And we do this through patented advanced analytics and optimization technology. And some of our customers include what you see here, some really well-known brands like Urban Outfitters, Aldo, Justice, J. Crew, Kohl's, Aeropostale, and there's more on our website if you'd like to take a look. And some of our underlying technologies, so some of that magic behind what we do, was formally recognized as one of the top 50 greatest innovations to come out of MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab, alongside some other things that you might have heard of before, such as the quantum computer, robotics, and email. So to further set the stage here, just a little bit before we dig deeper, if any of you are Gartner Research subscribers and you have access to this note, I'd highly recommend taking a look at it. It's called Will People or Machines Rule Algorithmic Retailing? And the long and short of this is that AI is here to stay, and it's having a huge impact on retail decision making. And of course, I pulled this because it has the reference to accuracy and speed, which is extremely important to being able to make effective retail decisions. And of course, interest in AI is growing. Again, stemming off the previous slide, there is a survey that was just this past month from Gartner, and retail CIOs were asked specifically about their organization's plans in terms of AI and artificial intelligence. And some interesting data came out of this. Again, this is from CIOs. 26% are actively experimenting with or have deployed some type of AI. And of course, there's good reason for this too, because there's a huge challenge of moving inventory across the supply chain, considering the complexity of decisions being made across varying points in the merchandising process. So this level of interest that you see here, the action being taken that this survey shows is indicative of that. But the question still remains, how do you approach this stuff? What do you do first for those that are in those earlier stages? And we hope with the help of AlixPartners in this session to answer some of those questions. And needless to say, I think it's safe that if you're here today listening to us, you're not in that bottom 17% of this slide. So what can get in the way? We have to talk about a few potential roadblocks or things that might come up that could cause a little bit of a challenge understanding how to best start with this type of thing. So if you look at the first potential roadblock here is data. It's the overwhelming amount of data available to you. There's been questions in this world of retail and analytics of, oh, I've got a data problem. We don't have the data that we need to do something. Well, actually, you have all the data you need. It's there. It's been there for years, if not decades. The challenge is, how do you aggregate all this information from the systems and silos into one place where you can make informed decisions to get you that outcome you're looking for, whether that's sell-through rates, whether that's higher margins by a certain percentage, whatever it might be. How do you achieve that end goal that you have? And that's through your data. And of course, the level of manipulation that we do with it from an analytics perspective. And needless to say, spreadsheets and traditional databases are not the answer here. And with the continued blurring of physical and digital, retailers have, I'd say, definitely more than one demand signal. They've got multiple demand signals. Gone are those days of just a simple website and maybe a few stores driving revenues, which makes it much easier, I guess you could say, in a relative term, to be able to define those important decisions across the process. So one demand channel versus the many demand channels of today is very much still getting in the way of retailers' potential success. And if you think about it, it's hard enough to figure out what to stock online versus in store and how to leverage the data between these. And in the past, someone may be responsible for, let's say, men's shoes online, and someone else might be responsible for men's shoes in stores, and they wouldn't interface, so they don't work together at all. And they never reported together. And they rarely knew what each other sold, and that is going away. So the area of opportunity that is here, approaching these challenges with the right processes and technologies is the main area of opportunity. And this is what we're here today to talk about, driving speed and accuracy into your merchandising strategy. So since I haven't heard much from Sean and Luca in the past few slides because I've been babbling, I'm guessing you guys are thumbs up on all this stuff here and you have nothing to add. So I want to let you kind of dig into your slides a little bit here so you can talk about some of the approach from a processes and implementation and data perspective too.
Great. Thanks, Todd.
Sure.
So just real quickly, for those of you on the call that aren't familiar with AlixPartners, we're a multi-industry global consulting firm, of which retail is our largest piece of the business. We live by our tagline of when it really matters. So we focus on really critical value driving projects across healthy companies, semi-healthy retailers, distressed retailers, really across the entire spectrum of retail. Today, obviously, we'll focus on MP&A and a bit on 2M as well. I won't go into too much detail here, but just from a kind of a differentiation standpoint, one thing that we really believe in is experienced senior teams. So we typically will approach a project with a smaller team, but more senior. Typically 15, 20 years of retail experience. A lot of us have, a mix of industry and consulting experience. And then when it comes to kind of our approach, really those senior teams allow us to kind of get to the opportunities and get to the solutions quicker. Have, a lot of battle-tested expertise on the team. And then kind of in concert with that, we have developed over the last many years, really taking some of our analytics that we kind of do on a frequent basis across projects, everything from benchmarking, store labor, sourcing, and obviously MP&A, and have created a retail platform out of that so that we can kind of hit the ground running once we get data. But on that note, one of the very interesting areas is MP&A, where we can kind of start shifting more towards predictive. And really partnering with firms like Celect and looking at what are some of the opportunities there. But Todd, I think that's probably all I'll say on this page to not be too commercial here.
You got it. I will move forward. Yep.
And Luca, I think you're going to take the next couple of pages.
Thanks, Sean. So as Sean was mentioning, this is going to be heavily focused on merchandise planning and allocation on that side of the retail operations. However, there is a very strong connection between that function and the product development life cycle, and that's really what we're talking about here. And so product development processes are moving faster every single day, just in order to stay up with the the poster children of fast development. At least on the apparel side, you think of Zara and H&M, and more broadly, of course, Amazon is the monolith out there. And what we're really seeing is this transition from these old models that are slower, seasonal, and more driven by gut feel. That has, you can see the length of some of these seasonal calendars for from initial design conception all the way through manufacturing of up to a year before anything will ever hit a store, to these new faster and seasonless and data-driven models, where you can actually take that and reduce it by a factor of 10. So get it down to about 5 weeks from concept to getting things into store. And there's a lot of manufacturing techniques that enable that within the supply chain. But I think the overall point is that because this product development timeline is really, really compressing, we also need to make sure that the merchandise planning and allocation functions are going at a similar speed to keep up. And so today's winners are really using data and insights to speed up their development cycles. Everything's moving towards this seasonless mindset. So they come up with an idea, or they're able to react to a trend in the marketplace. They can jump on that almost immediately. And they're seeing real results. And so we had published a study back in October of last year that was talking about how retailers that are moving faster actually are seeing greater margins than their competitors. And this is primarily looking at apparel retailers. And so, as I mentioned, it's not just the development cycles, and we got to keep the buyers and the merchants up with this as well.
So, Luca, if I could just interrupt one second while you're going through this, are there types of retailers that you're seeing? You mentioned Zara and H&M. Are there if you look at retail, and there's classifications of different retailer types, whether they're mono brands or global brands or department stores, whatnot. Are there certain types that are leading the way when it comes to that fast track, or that I was thinking of a term like agile merchandising? Are there certain types that are really leading the way in that way?
In agile merchandising, I think it's I think the realization for a lot of these retailers is that they're doing them kind of hand in hand. I think we have some examples of that Sean will be covering in a few slides. But as in terms of the clients that we've gone into, we've really taken a holistic view at some of the clients. So we had a sports apparel retailer that we were at relatively recently, where we took 25 weeks out of their development cycle, and we added some speed models that were actually down to 10 weeks from conception to ordering. And so to do that, you got to have everyone in the room and aligning on what are your timing and actions, and how are we going to use the data that we have at that time to make a buying decision right there up front. And so they're naturally going to get there along with some of these product development cycles. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yep.
Perfect. And so a lot of these process changes are going to actually be made in the context of our broader merchandise strategy. So if we go to the next page, we're starting to look at what some of the key inputs are going to be. And really it's driven around 4 kind of main areas of consumer research, hindsighting, trend, and competitive dynamics. And I'm not going to read all of these questions, but what we're going to be going through in the next few minutes is talking about some of the tools that we can use to answer some of these questions. And a lot of this really comes down to reinventing the hindsighting process and some of the trend process to use the data that we have available to us and from our other partners in order to make more informed decisions and move faster and be smarter than our competitors. And so from there, I'm actually going to pass it back to Sean to talk about some of the tools that we've used with some of our clients.
Great. Thanks, Luca. Todd, do you mind advancing one slide? Great, thanks. So the next couple of pages really are just examples of some of the types of analysis that we use when we do kind of a MP&A transformation. And if I think about kind of the last 5 to 10 years, what we've really been helping clients with is increase the sophistication of their hindsight analytics and the other analytics that they're using, and really kind of shifting more from traditional kind of high level decisions based off of high level averages and instinct to now, trying to leverage this massive amount of data that's available based on our new big data capabilities that have come around in the last 5 years, and better use of attributing to really get down to lower level of analysis, better visualizations, and really just improve, the overall decision making. So now, thinking forward, starting, the last couple of years with firms like Select, now we're at a position now where we're kind of thinking through, how can we make even better improvements to this to really be more predictive and more trend, on trend as we're doing these hindsights. So on this first page, really this is kind of digging down into some typical assortment management or assortment hindsight tools that we would use. We tend to take a kind of a peel the onion approach. So the first little vignette there, Jim Roy analysis, this is an example of, if you imagine being able to see all of your classes and looking at the Jim Roy achieved for those classes versus my inventory investment there, and really looking at, where do we see over investments or under investments based on that Jim Roy score. And then we're able to kind of dive deeper in the choice level comparisons in the attribute analysis, which are the next two vignettes. We're really within one of those classes, we can start to diagnose why we either have good Jim Roy performance or poor Jim Roy performance, looking down at the choice level. So in that middle example, many of you may have used something similar to this. We would call this just our choice level scatter plot. But in this case, we're really mapping gross margin achieved versus APS, or average per store unit velocity. And really what we're looking for in that bottom left corner, these would be our disappointments. So they would be kind of below average APS, below average gross margin. And then we've highlighted kind of the red area where those are significantly below average. Those would be kind of the first obvious examples of areas where we could either rationalize the assortment or look for ways to convert those styles to something that would achieve better. So that could either be, if you're a mixed private brand and national brand retailer, shifting some of those poor performing national brands to private label, or adjusting styling or adjusting the promotions that we're running, et cetera. I'm really kind of working. Obviously, there's a lot of science to this, but there's also a lot of art to this from the merchant and planner perspective of really, once we have visualization, really digging into that and understanding sort of the intakes of the assortment. The attribute analysis, this is something that we would typically run by within a class, looking at what is the performance by price point, what's the performance by color, what's the performance by silhouette, et cetera, and doing some of the same analyses of what's working, what's not working. And then obviously you could have kind of a forward-looking view here as well in terms of what some of the color trends might be upcoming, or silhouette trends, et cetera, or how our customers are reacting to the pricing. Todd, you can go to the next one. So just a few more examples. The first one here is sort of a fourth vignette for the assortment analysis. This would be where now that we've analyzed the assortment at a whole, we can also take a deeper dive and look at the assortment across our store groups. So in this case, it would be store volume groups. Obviously, you could have lots of other kind of groups, but this is really looking at what is our breadth and our depth across the volume groups. I don't know if you can really see the circles that well here, but each one of those lines would represent, in this case, a division. This could obviously be a department or class. Each one of the bubbles on the line would be a volume group. So going from left to right, it's lowest volume to highest volume. So what you would want to see in most cases is, as you increase in volume group, you're increasing breadth and depth. But this is a nice way to look back and see if from a planning perspective and a merchandising perspective, if we kind of hit our target of how we wanted to vary the assortment across the volume groups. And then we can make shifts in the upcoming season for that. Then the middle of the page here, this is really getting into the depth decision. So a lot of times what we'll do here, if a retailer doesn't really have a sophisticated tool for seasonal buying, we would look at kind of in hindsight comparing how they actually bought the product, whether that was based on sort of merchant instinct or some other type of calculation they were doing. versus what we would call kind of a traditional buy calculation approach, which you see at the formula at the top there, really being, you know, how many weeks is this going to sell for? How many stores is it going to? What's my target APS? That gets me my targeted sales. And then you have a sell-through target to get to a target receipts. But really, sort of the deeper level science here is kind of breaking this down across volume groups and across product tiers, and really understanding what is that APS at each one of those intersections. But this is also an area that's very ripe for predictive analytics, because, you know, part of this is really understanding going forward what are going to be the items in my assortment that are going to be A, B, or C. So using predictive analytics, attribute analytics, things like that to understand, you know, for the go forward assortment, how should I bucket those across the product tiers? And then based on that, I can look historically, how does a product tier A perform in a, you know, volume group A cluster, volume group B cluster, et cetera. And then the final one on the page here is promotion effectiveness. This is where we actually go in and we can kind of deconstruct the actual performance of each promotion. So understanding kind of not just the kind of incremental lift and the discount and the vendor funds for those of you that have national brands, but really, you know, looking at the underlying cannibalization, halo effect, the pull forward effect, and then the actual execution costs of the promotion. And then the Pareto here that you see is really, you know, trying to understand where are we actually creating value via promotions and where are we destroying value on the end of the Pareto there. Really looking at where should we rationalize or where should we invest in some of the better performing promotions. Thank you. And then this page here, as Luca was alluding to earlier, you know, when people say speed in retail, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, speeding up the development calendar, which many retailers have been working on for the last, you know, at least decade or so. And, you know, we find that every time we end up in that project situation, you know, as you start to work on that, it becomes very apparent how important a kind of well thought out, timely, and accurate assortment architecture is for an input into that process. Because as you speed up the development tracks and you increase the number of development tracks that you have, and for some of those fast tracks, you're probably using external partners to do that. So really being able to lay out a plan and understand what part of the assortment is going to go through each one of those tracks, and what part of the assortment is going to be designated to each one of those partner models, and then really having a clear view of what is going to be the choice count, what's going to be the volume, et cetera, that's going to be going through the various pipes there. So this tends to be overlooked by a lot of retailers when they start to head down the path of let's speed up our product development cycle, but it becomes very apparent very quickly that, you know, there needs to be kind of much more thorough upfront work done to create that assortment architecture. That's it, Todd. I think
that makes sense. So I have a real quick question about that. So the level of attribute usage in that case, when you're saying that in the development cycle, perhaps they're, I don't want to say cutting corners, but cutting corners. Does that mean that they're not using attributes in your, as far as what you guys have seen with some of your engagements, that attributes are forgoed in that case, or there are just, as you were saying before, just simply choice counts?
No, I mean, I would say, you know, it's a mix by client, but, you know, the examples over to the left there of just the two attributes really looking
Right.
at kind of what we would call time on offer, trend, seasonal, and core, and then good, better, best price points. That would be, you know, sort of a bare minimum. And then obviously there are, you know, lots of other attributes that you could layer into here. I think it's kind of just a matter of how sophisticated you want to be, and which ones are obviously those attributes can be valuable. Any attribute could be valuable during the assortment construct, but what are the driving attributes towards each one of these development tracks here?
Yep, makes sense. Just going back to that, we looking at that bottom one, that bottom block is a great transition. Moving back over to the Select side here, from a data-driven perspective and predictive perspective, process is obviously is important, but getting those insights is a game changer completely. And I want to touch on some of this here. So we've been covering with Sean and Luca about how important some of the process approach implementation, not so much implementation, but in looking at data and utilizing the data that you have, whether it's historical trend information that you might have in your back pocket. But from a predictive perspective, I wanted to make sure that we explained and conveyed how Select envisions what a predictive platform or what a predictive set of solutions should look like for a retailer. And this is across the MP&A process. This is very often how we communicate it to our customers and prospects. So most of the conversation we had today was around, if you look at this, what we call internally the wheel, from plan, buy, allocate, and fulfill. We touched mostly on the plan and buy part of it at the top there. And perhaps that was close, you guys correct me, but Luca and Sean, but that's probably because you guys were speaking a little bit more about the development side, and these maybe are the closest to the development side, the closest end of the merchandising process. But for each of these areas, Select drives, we use predictive analytics to drive decisions around each of those 4 areas that we've isolated. So I wanted to cover each one of these for you so you can understand really how we play in this and how we can complement an organization like AlixPartners. So from a plan perspective, it's called plan optimization. And what this does, like I mentioned before in the beginning, this provides you an insight into what to buy. So with plan optimization, you can discover these opportunities to optimize store assortments, which means you can get a better understanding of the spend you should have across departments and classes to reach that maximum revenue. And you can also look at the optimal mix of products, again, from a predictive perspective, looking forward to the next season, for example, an optimal mix of products, otherwise known as breadth and depth across locations. And if we pivot off to the right there, to the darker blue, we see buy optimization. Buy optimization is the how much to buy. So there was a little section in Sean's slide there about, I think it was the buy, I don't want to say quantification, buy calc maybe, I think you guys call it. Yeah. So essentially this buy optimization would be adding that predictive model to that, or adding a predictive angle to that to be able to look forward and say, here's the amount you should buy. Here's your buy sheet. Here's the amount you should buy for this specific attribute for next season, or for the next time that you send another set of product to that store. So with this one, with buy optimization, it's very straightforward. And how you do this, you import a buy sheet, and you'll see an instant optimized set of results using your product attributes. And moving over to allocation, so we've already covered now plan, which is what to buy, how much to buy, allocation, where to put it. So what store are you going to put it in? So with allocation optimization, you can deliver these allocations reflecting that demand at the store level. And essentially what we're doing with that demand prediction is we're optimizing the allocation of those purchase styles that you already have. So looking back in the buy and plan, these purchase styles to your store. So considering various POs at the same time to be able to allocate efficiently together. And fulfillment, which is the last mile, right? So this one has probably gotten the most press lately, not from our perspective, well, partly, but also in general out there when you're reading articles about various retailers. How are they changing the game and getting product to their customers easiest, quickest, fastest, most profitable for them? You've heard a lot about Target. You've heard a lot about a lot of other retailers that are making some huge changes to their model and what they're doing to make it easier for people to shop. Specifically, what we're talking about with fulfillment is how to get it from whatever place they have their inventory to their customers in the most profitable way. The way we're seeing that many retailers are utilizing this, for the most part, is what is being called ship from store, right? So many retailers are approaching ship from store successfully, but they're maybe realizing that this isn't the most profitable endeavor. So what we're doing is providing them a way to balance multiple objectives, whether it comes to shipping costs, whether it comes to various speed-related benefits, various things that they're measured on, to make sure that they're balancing everything together to be able to achieve that optimal balance and those goals that they might have. And very often they're using an order management system, which on its own cannot do that. So let's cover very quickly. I want to cover a couple of use cases. This one is for plan optimization. And again, this is the what to buy stuff. And if you were going to look at this, this is for a high fashion department store. And in this case, they were unsure which product yields the best return at each location, otherwise known as a store in this case, to meet their sell-through targets given their business constraints. So this, of course, being able to meet those sell-through targets, generally speaking, means less markdowns, which then means more margins. So in this case here, you can see there is significant revenues gained out of this and sell-through increase gained out of this. So this retailer is able to optimize their merchandising and planning across stores and departments, and we were able to highlight growth opportunities and balance assortments with customer demand effectively, again, from a predictive perspective. And you can see just by some of these numbers that these results are significant. And this was, just as a side note, this was just for one department out of many. So there's plenty of potential to go around on this one. I wanted to take you through the other use case here, since again this was mainly focused on that plan buy part of it, based on some of the stuff that Alex was talking about. But in this case, the retailer had many variations of cut, color, and styles, and in this case, it was difficult to know with confidence which one will sell and how much budget should be allocated for the buys. So we talked about this before with buy optimization. Is that how much are you making the best bets with the budget that you have, with the money that you have? And with Celect, this retailer is able to maximize the return from the merchandise buys and improve the effectiveness of their inventory investment. And of course, again, this all comes back to reducing the need for markdowns and extending that margin. So each of these cases that we went over, tying this all back to speed, they both benefited from speed. In both of these cases, what would have taken possibly weeks to accomplish what they did, instead took a matter of hours in some of these decisions that were made. So instead of flipping through multiple spreadsheets and trying to do your own calculations and your own predictive modeling, Celect was able to do that for them from a very fast and accurate perspective. So guys, Sean and Luca, let's touch on some takeaways here as we're wrapping this up here. Do you want to touch on the first one there, the prioritize what drives value? Any thoughts on that one, guys?
Yeah, Todd. I mean, so obviously, I think for most client situations that we walk into, there are many opportunities to kind of increase horsepower in the analytics that we're doing and drive speed and drive accuracy. I think rather than trying to take on the whole world at once, what we like to do is really kind of size the prize for each one of those opportunities and really focus on what's gonna drive the highest value first. So that tends to be, in many cases on the MP&A side, that tends to be, you can get quick value on the allocation and replenishment side, and really those dollars can start hitting rather quickly. And then we kind of work our way backwards and start to then address the assortment and the buying piece of it, which really kind of allows, quote unquote, the program kind of starts to pay for itself as you're starting to reap the benefits of those product placement improvements, and then then you start working on assortment management, which obviously takes a little while longer to burn in, just given the long life cycle of buying.
Sure. Yeah, across seasons and such. Absolutely. Yeah, and just, again, going back to some of the things we've been talking about already, and I think it's been hopefully made fairly clear that, being able to leverage some type of a predictive nature to your data will help you with those better decisions. And of course, speed up the rate at which those decisions are made. But we talked about speed a fair amount, and it is a requirement to compete. I think we've made that pretty clear. But if you're not using your data in any way whatsoever, in any meaningful way whatsoever, then it's very difficult to benefit from any type of speed in that case. So while we have some extra time here, I want to touch on a few questions. In the past couple webcasts we've done, we've enabled the ability to, when you sign up, you can submit a question. So we had a few questions that came in prior to starting the webinar, and I wanted to just touch on a few of those if we have time. There's definitely a couple that you could answer, Sean and Luca. So why don't I start by just touching on one that came in early on, and it was an integration question. And we get this a fair amount because Select is not a system of record. We're not a planning solution. We are that engine. Again, we are that demand sensing predictive engine in the background, making those other solutions essentially have smarter data in it and better data in it. So that said, you're probably going to understand the answer that I provide for this one is, do you integrate with NetSuite is the question. So with NetSuite, there's several options inside of it around OMS or financial planning, and the answer kind of pulling it above NetSuite and just looking at systems of record in general is that yes, we integrate with ERPs, order management systems, planning systems, any type of system of record through our flexible APIs. So, like I said, in the case of NetSuite, it could be the OMS or financial planning system. So that's a yes, I would say to that in a short manner. So guys, Luca and Sean, a question that actually both of us could answer. There was a question around how are you running these analyses in Excel through a specific data analysis platform? Are you optimizing the data you already have, yours or also your competitors? So there's a lot of questions in that. And I don't necessarily want to get into all that, but I think what we could do with that is maybe talk a little bit about how you run your analysis, if you can answer some of that, guys, just as far as you showed some of that data before and some of the hindsight data that you use to help them maybe look backwards to see how they've been performing. Is there a very quick overview you can give on that? And then I'll move on to ours.
Yeah, Todd, I'll take that one. So, I mean, over the last 10 years, it's obviously been an evolution of, everybody used to work in Excel spreadsheets, and then you move to Access, and then SQL, and what we've landed on recently in the last few years is Tableau's been a good source for sort of data aggregation, data manipulation, and visualizations. But now we're sort of kind of taking the next evolution and building, kind of tying all of those retail analyses together into a single platform that we've been working on for a while. So it's continues to evolve, and then obviously when we run into situations where it makes sense to involve partners like Select, and that is obviously an option that we leverage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of data sharing on that side, and we've from an analysis perspective, same with us. Our predictive platform is not, generally speaking, in Excel. It can be essentially our predictions can be placed into Excel. If you have a buy sheet, for example, that's in Excel. We can just plop those optimized buys right in there for you, and you can go from there. Or they can be just recognized in our UI itself. But as far as how we run these analysis, and there's another question on how do you compare to your competitors. That's a loaded question too, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But that said, I can give you a better idea of Select and why we've built this and what we've done. So we've purpose-built this platform, so the Select platform and the underlying Select engine for retail, not for any other industry. We've built it specifically for retail, for the problems or the potential, I should say, not even the problems, the opportunity that's in the MP&A. So the plan, buy, allocate, fulfill parts of the cycle. There's so much opportunity we see there, and we built a platform specifically to make use of that and to help retailers see through that opportunity. And very quickly, the engine itself creates a detailed model essentially for each customer and product, and we call this a choice model. And it essentially leverages context around purchase behavior, what was bought versus what was offered, what they didn't buy, for example. And you extrapolate that over thousands of transactions and thousands of customers buying various things, and it ends up with this very accurate demand prediction. We call it true demand prediction, essentially based on how products interact with each other. And this impacts the assortment that you have in your stores, which of course impacts all those parts of your merchandise planning, buy, allocation, and fulfill. So we're taking weeks of work, turning it into hours. These hard calculations, decisions being made with high accuracy and speed. So plenty of examples that we have on our website, and we'd be happy to dig deeper with anyone that's interested after this event. So for the Alex guys, so for you guys, Luca or Sean, from a new engagement perspective, there's a question about the most common engagement when you go into a new client, like a new the most common opportunity, or maybe it's a question for you of where do you start when you go in sometimes? Like where do you find yourself focusing when you go into a new client?
Wow. So there's no typical engagement, but I would say most often our projects start with what we would call a total company quick strike. So that would be experts from our side that are collaborating with leaders on the company side across each of the functional areas. And so this could be everything from SG&A reductions to top line to margin expansion, et cetera. And typically that lasts about 5 or 6 weeks for that quick strike. And basically what you have is starts with, kind of defining our hypotheses by the second week, reviewing that, then coming back with, sort of data-backed opportunities and size of the prize for each of those opportunities by the 4th week. And then by the 6th week, we're really at kind of a program planning phase of what does this look like if we want to move forward with an implementation. And then, specifically in the MP&A space, what a project typically looks like there, if desired by the client, we're looking at everything from, the organizational structure and resources against that to, comparison to best-in-class processes. And then as part of that process review, where do we really need to, kind of up our game in terms of increasing horsepower on the data analysis that's, living side by side with that process. And so all of that really kind of turns into what are our SG&A opportunities, and then what are our typically either inventory or margin driving opportunities on the MP&A process and tool side.
Got it. Thank you. So there was a follow-up question that came in, and this is going to be the last one we answer because I do want to wrap this up out of respect for everyone's time. There was a question when we were showing some of the numbers, when I was showing some of the numbers here for the top half of the circle of plan and buy, and there are other ones we could have gone over for fulfillment and allocation. There's a question is, looking at these numbers here, do the ones the value that we're seeing from a benefit perspective, do those mirror what we're seeing with the top half? So if you look at plan and buy, does allocate and fulfill have the same level of opportunity? The answer is yes. There's different metrics that we calculate for those, meaning there's different metrics across those that are important to them. From an allocation perspective, yes, it's sell-through, and we're seeing very similar sell-through increase rates, but it depends on their existing sell-through target, of course, and how much we're able to exceed that. And fulfillment, there's very different metrics there, but one of our existing customers, several of our customers are seeing very large improvements in margins, and it all comes back to in fulfillment margins, making sure that they're fulfilling ship from store orders from stores that actually can afford to ship that item. So we're not cannibalizing in-store sales, which of course have the highest margin, and we're fulfilling these orders from the right location. And in the end, like I mentioned before, that boosts their margins. So the gains that we usually show for our customers is from a margin perspective. Sometimes we'll show revenues, but like one of our, I don't have the exact quote, but one of our customers spoke to our internal team. It was last year, and he said, all day will I take margin gains over revenue gains, and that's I think something that anyone on this webcast at any retailer would agree with. So that's where we focus our efforts. Thanks again for everyone for joining, and Sean and Luca, thank you guys, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Thanks for the invite and allowing us to participate. Thanks everybody online.